Instead of looking at your relationships or the ways in which you show up in relationship as problems, what if you shifted it to, this is an opportunity for me to see what I need to see, to know what I need to know, to be fully in my power. And instead of being attached to the other person agreeing or being okay with that, what if you could learn the conscious communication tools? What if you could learn how to speak the truth of your heart? What if you could learn how to own your boundaries? What if you could learn how to receive love for who you are? What if you could learn how to cultivate these conscious relationships in which you're not attached to that because you are so sourced from within, and you're able to communicate in a way that allows you, the other person, to have that freedom to decide if they're up for that or not, and not make it a problem if they're a no to doing their own inner work, because you're willing to act on your own behalf anyway. And it comes down to you choosing for you all the time. That's what sovereignty is. It's you being your own authority. It's you choosing for you. It's you sourcing from within the love, the safety, the belonging, the worth. It's you fully in your own power, reclaiming that from external sources. That's sovereignty. You belong to you. You're whole and complete unto self. But can you see how this is the exact opposite of what we've been told? And that's why it helps to understand these beliefs. Because in order to reclaim your sovereignty and freedom in your relationships, you do have to go against what everybody else will probably tell you. And go against what you've probably seen. And we could just talk about the symptoms of how this shows up, and that could just be enough, or we could just get to, look at, I don't want to call them shallow, but more shallow ways of just addressing these symptoms. And that's fine if that's all you want. That's just not what I offer. I feel like it's important that we get to the root and we pull it out by the root and we create that divine level of freedom instead of just looking for a temporary measure to make ourselves feel better or a shallow fix. Because this is the level of soul healing that we need for this planet and for ourselves. It's deep. It's deep work. And personally, I wouldn't have done it any other way. I wouldn't have done it any other way. Yeah, the Band-Aids aren't enough. You've got to go all the way. And if you're listening to this, it's because your soul brought you here. It's because your soul's interested in going all the way. The question is, are you going to say yes? It's like, I don't know, I know a few of you are gardeners. You can go to a weed, and you could try to cut off the top of it, right? Oh, it'll just grow back again in 2 weeks because I just cut this little weed and it's going to grow right back. Or you dig a hole and you pull the weed out by the root, because then you know that it's not going to keep sprouting up. You get to the root, and the root of what we experience in relationships is self-denial. What is self-denial? Denial of the self is denial of the soul. And we can't experience true love in relationships if we're not acting from the soul and heart, because every other form of love is conditional. It's all conditional. If we're acting from ego, conditioned beliefs, mind only, I can only love you if you're giving me what I need. I can only love you if you're serving me. I can only love you if you make me feel good. I can only love you if you agree with me. That's the need-based karmic kind of connections based on relationships, based on lack, in need, demands, expectations. That's the kind of relationships that we have created in our society. And those are the exact kind of relationships that are anything but free. We will never feel free in those kinds of dynamics. We will never feel free in those kinds of relationships. We will never feel free to be who we are or to own our boundaries or to speak our truth in those dynamics, because they're need-based, they're lack-based. They're sourcing externally. And what that does, a little fancy diagram here. So I could show you on the screen, but I much prefer to show you here so I can point to it. So what that does is this creates, like most relationships, right? Are like people are subsumed under the other. I belong to you. Oh, you complete me. I'm yours. You're mine, right? Like most relationships are based on one person losing themselves to the other, or the people becoming so entangled they have no individuated identity left, right? So that could be the possession, because so much of what we've come to be taught that love is actually possession. Okay, so I'm going to speak to that for a moment. Because of the story of Adam and Eve, because of the story that basically denied the divinity within woman and ultimately within man, it created the marriage, but relationships in general, in which we have been told that love is possession. Love is giving people what they want. Love is serving. Love is sacrifice, right? That's not love. It's ownership. It's control. That's not love. So what is love? Well, love sees, right? Love sees the individual self. Love sees the soul of the other person by seeing the soul within oneself. Love includes both. Love sees, hears, honors. Love is freedom. So when we have a relationship based on all about one person only, or possession, or control, or entanglement, what that means is that's not love. It's not love, but that's what we have in our society today, and we've normalized that as love. We've normalized that as appropriate, and we're supposed to accept that and be happy with that, but none of us feel free in that, which is why the divorce rate is more than 50% now. And we keep searching for it in the other person. The only way it's ever going to come back is when you start to do this work to then you self-individuate. You reclaim your sovereignty. Each person ultimately has to do this. Though usually it can happen together in relationship. It can. Both people have to be willing to do it. You start to reclaim your power. You start to reclaim your sovereignty. You start to cultivate internal freedom. You do this work. The other person does this work, ideally, right? And then from that point, you can create sacred union. Hopefully you can see where the two circles intersect halfway. It's the vesica Pisces. So the two circles come halfway, they meet, and then what's formed is a third. Okay, what's formed is this third. The third is the relationship. So in this old paradigm of relationship, one person becomes subsumed under the other, or there's no more self-individuated identity. In the true love, right? And this is actually ancient sacred geometry. In true love, the two wholes, so first you have to come whole and complete to self. First you have to belong to self, self-source. And then the two wholes come together, meet halfway, and create a third, which is the relationship. So sacred union or true love never requires denial of the self. True love overflows from the self. It's shared. It's cultivated from within. It's sourced from within. It doesn't seek externally. That's true love. That's free love, because love is freedom. Love doesn't demand. That does not mean you don't have boundaries. This is where it gets tricky, why it helps to have somebody help see, right? Are you talking about, Katie, what this is? What this particular diagram is? I just created this. If that was your question about what is that. Definitely condition as women to belong. Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. It, when we feel like we belong to somebody else, that's what you meant. Okay, good. Yeah, this is just something I created to help help explain this and show this. Because when we feel like we belong to another, which is what we're told to feel, right? Like particularly, you know, particularly as women, though I've heard men say this too, of like, oh, I belong to you, and that makes me feel wanted because it makes me feel worthy, because it makes me feel good. That's all part of the conditioning that we're supposed to belong to another. but that also is what creates the imprisonment energetically and emotionally, to submit, to give others what they want, to not be able to say no. So we have to be able to belong, create that belonging within self, so that we're not denying the self to belong to another. Because when we are denying the self to belong, we're actually telling ourselves we don't belong as we are. We're actually separating from the self to, quote, belong to another, which means we don't belong anyway, because we have to be different than we are to belong. It's so messed up, but that's the conditioning.